Okay, I hope everybody's having a good week so far. I know it's been really stressful and and still continues to be stressful. But hopefully we'll have some resolution soon. But I really appreciate all the students that are here with us today. I appreciate Nathan for coming out and speaking with students about Credera and all the really awesome possibilities with digital consultancy. But I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Marcy Bishop Lilly, and I'm the career coach for the College of Visual Arts and Design and the College of Music. I am working with the Director of Foundations, Vinod Shrestha, to bring you the CVAD Career Roundtable session. Each session will feature guest speakers who work in various areas of creative careers to give students insight into career possibilities. At the end of the session, students will have an opportunity to ask our presenters any questions that they may have. Students, you may type your question in the chat and we will get to them after our session. These sessions will be recorded to be shared with CVAD and the Career Center, and you may find these recordings at the careercenter.unt.edu. All right, so moving on, we have today's agenda. So today's agenda will consist of looking over the calendar of sessions and guest faculty we will have at our last and final session of the fall semester, which will be on December the 4th. I would also like to introduce a podcast of the month titled Infamous Art Heist with Dr. Laura Evans. Dr. Laura Evans will be joining us for our next career roundtable session, and we will be discussing K through art education career pathways and also her background in art crime, which is really awesome. I'm really interested and excited about that. Connie Hatchett, education manager at the Kimball Art Museum, will also be joining us for our final career roundtable session 2. Connie will be discussing careers related to art museum education and the experience and skills you need for this type of career. So to the right of your screen, you'll see session 4. Again, we'll be having Connie Hatchett and Dr. Laura Evans in that session. And I'll also be giving you a little reminder about the Mean Green Mentor Program, which I'll be bringing up later in the session. So this is the podcast of the month, and I found this QR code on Instagram. I believe CVAD shared that yesterday with students. But if you're interested in listening to this podcast and being familiar with art crime prior to our next career roundtable session, go ahead and listen to it. Get familiar. This might be something that you're really interested in, and we'll have Dr. Laura Evans in our next session, so feel free to check it out. And to access that podcast, all you have to do is scan that QR code with your phone camera. So I would also like to introduce the Mean Green Mentor Program. This program pairs students with employers and mentors in designated career areas. Please visit the website below, meangreenmentors.unt.edu, to set up your profile and get matched with employers related to your major. And also, if you have any questions about this program, feel free to let me know at the end of the session. This is a pretty new program. We're just getting everything started. So if you have any questions, just let me know at the end of the session. All right, so today we will be bringing you session 3 with Assistant Professor Dr. Troy Abel, Professor of Communication Design and User Experience. Troy has been with us since 2017 and has taught courses in contextual research methods, foundations for communication design, and foundations of user-centered design. We also have alumni Nathan McCown of Credera Digital Consultancy. Credera is a digital consulting firm focused on strategy, technology, data, and transformation. More than 600 consultants across the globe partner together with clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies to emerging industry leaders. Credera is headquartered in Dallas and hosts offices in Houston, Denver, Chicago, New York, London, Manchester, and Leeds. We're so happy to have you here in our session today. Thank you for being here and speaking with our students about career pathways related to user experience. So I do have Troy is going first in the session today, but since Nathan is already here, we're gonna have Nathan go first. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and I'm also gonna make sure that we don't have Troy waiting in our waiting room. Let me make sure. I'm still not there. Okay. So Nathan, if you want to go ahead and get started with your presentation, then we will be on our way.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcy. Okay, let me see if I can get this started. All right, I'm sharing my screen now. Let me know if y'all can see.
Looks good, Nathan.
Awesome. Yeah, anyway, so happy to be here with y'all. Like Marcy said, I am a UNT alum. I graduated in 2018, and super excited to be here to talk with y'all. Hopefully Troy can join a little bit later and give y'all insight into the specific comm design UX program at UNT. But before we get started, I'll give you, I'll introduce myself, go into my background a little bit in just a second. But I'll also give you an overview of, Credera, the company that I work for, what UX consulting is, and then how that relates to Credera. So I graduated in 2018. My degree was in visual communication design. I went through the more traditional graphic design route. As I was leaving, Troy and some other UNT professors were working to establish a UX specific path. So I wasn't able to participate in that path specifically, but I took an interaction design class and a product design class within the communication design kind of graphic design route anyway. And that was sort of where my interest in user experience was I guess, sparked. So that's a little bit about me. A little bit more about Credera. Marcy covered it a little bit, but we're a consulting firm that kind of focuses on four service areas, which is strategy, transformation, tech, and data. We're primarily based in Dallas, but we do have some other, geographies in, New York and Chicago. We had recently just acquired a consultant agency in London, which is super exciting. So definitely growing, kind of starting to go more global, which is great. But clicking into a little bit of our services a little bit more, we have three main practices, which is management consulting, user experience consulting, and tech consulting. So obviously our focus here today is user experience, but user experience kind of falls into the strategy and transformation sectors of our business. Strategy in how we plan and basically figure out business strategy and how that influences design decisions and development decisions, and how we take those insights and turn them into solutions. So one thing that I'll kind of touch on really quick, so I don't know what everyone's current majors are, or you're still undecided or trying to figure out what you want to do. But I got into visual communication design because I loved art and I loved design, and I liked making things that were just fun to look at, beautiful, things like that. Really enjoy that, and I still enjoy that quite a lot. But something that was really interesting about user experience design to me was the blending of design and art, and with the goal of being functional. So you're making something that looks really nice, but you're also helping users do something. You're helping them perform a task, something that they need to do. And instead of having just the bare minimum of what you need to do, for your users. User experience is all about users being at the center of what you're doing. So making something that looks great, that is easy and enjoyable for them to use. So that was always just something that really kind of stuck out to me. And I also just love the interaction of, users interacting with something that I'm making for them. So that is, something that I really value in UX. But kind of leaning into why UX is so important. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Envision, but they're a pretty popular company that's in the UX space, and they offer some prototyping tools and things like that to kind of explore for designers. But they had done a study basically analyzing the relationship between UX and businesses, and they kind of have found that businesses that really value user experience, it had a lot of positive business outcomes. So, there's kind of focusing on UI and making things look good, but the UX side of things is where you get a lot of business value. And companies can kind of be all over the spectrum of to what degree are their UX platforms developed, from level 1 being what happens on the screen simply, to level 5 of like UX is essential to like our business strategy. So my main point being here is that this is a super sought after industry and field, and a lot of really good high up businesses are seeing the value of UX. So there's definitely, if you're interested in this, there's definitely a market for it. So getting into a little bit more of the granular view of just what is user experience consulting. So at Credera, we sort of have, within our UX practice, we sort of have 3 branches. We have our UX researchers, which, the goal for a UX researcher is to be a part of the initial phase of trying to figure out, the user needs, how the products and services we build are going to help them, and really just trying to validate whether people are not, whether or not people will respond in a positive way to what we're making. Experience design kind of gets into the realm that I play in, which is taking all the skills that I learned in visual communication design from a visual perspective and applying that to user interfaces, and making sure that we're hitting business needs of the clients as well as user needs. And then after that has kind of been established and we've done designing and prototyping, we kind of hand it off to developers to take our designs that we've kind of crafted and make real. So putting designs into code and making a website or making an app. So one thing that's great about Credera is we have hands on all of those aspects, from ideation to completion of developing the actual product. And clicking in a little bit further, as far as like, we have those 3 sectors, but what are each of the sectors doing? So research kind of plays in the research and analysis realm. So the kind of figuring out what the problems are and which one of those problems we should solve if we can. Experience design plays in the analyzing and designing realm. Sometimes as designers, we need to either do some research ourselves a little bit, or just kind of, analyze research that's been given to us and say, okay, how do I, with the research that's been given to me, or with the data that's out there, how can I solve this problem from a visual perspective? And then from designing to, or from experience design to development, kind of going from design to implementing. So there's kind of this cycle of figuring out what the problem is, trying to solve it with design, and then implementing it. And then once you've done that, testing, how do people react to the thing that we've made? And it's kind of a cycle. It's just going from, how do users react to that, analyzing how they, reacted to it, designing new features for it, and implementing that. And it's just kind of a continuous process. So it's really fun to be a part of that, and have users be, involved in that way. So I'll get into a little bit about some of the work that we've done. So We have Chili's as a client, and one thing that we did for them was, they had some disparate sites. They had a couple different sites with different URLs, and they were kind of disjointed. What we did was we blended it together, made one kind of cohesive site, but the goal was to not only make it look good and more understandable, but make it responsive. And what responsive design means really is making sure that designs look good from desktop screens to laptop screens to mobile screens to iPads. So there's a lot of different breakpoints. So that's one thing about UX design that's great. It's because everything you're making is dynamic. It needs to be able to scale and fit different screens and things like that. So there's a lot of work into making sure that if it looks good on desktop, it also needs to look good on mobile. And so that was kind of our main focus with Chili's. But with all the research that we put into it and designs and iterations, we were able to kind of ultimately, help users start and finish their online ordering experience. So that was something really positive that Chili's got from our process. And not only did we just kind of improve the experience with the way the hierarchy and the visuals, but also just made it a lot faster from a tech standpoint, that our kind of front end developers and our kind of behind the scenes coders can help implement. Another client that we have was Finish Line. Basically, we kind of helped them with the strategy portion and the designing portion, actually all three portions. So strategy, design, and development. So we did a design sprint to kind of address their needs. And what we found was that they, a lot of their users were engaging with the website on mobile. So we took a mobile first priority. Once we kind of established that, we set it, or we continued to expand that across, other screens as well. Like I mentioned with Chili's, just making sure things are responsive. And then we were able to do some A/B testing as well, which is also really fun to do. You kind of involve users at this point and you show different iterations. So you have users interact with option A, you have users interact with option B, and that way we get data and we see, okay, with option A, they were able to complete an order more efficiently than they were with B. So that way we can decide which route is the best route, and we've basically allowed users to pick that. So Finish Line, we launched this like kind of right before the holiday season, when their users are really prominent during that time trying to make purchases for the holidays. And so having that launch right before holidays was really great for them, because they were able to really increase their rate on investment, and increase revenue quite a bit. One of our final kind of case studies I'll show is we recently just did our own branding, actually. So we had kind of been building as a company, and our website was a little bit outdated just because we've been so busy with client work. But we were able to kind of identify that we needed to kind of refresh our own brand and website as well. So we were able to give ourselves a new visual identity, but also apply that to our website and kind of design out pages, work on the hierarchy of information, kind of figure out how we need to restructure things. And we were also able, for some of the designers that are interested in illustration and iconography, we were able to kind of make some custom illustrations and icons that would kind of go across our site. So that's kind of an area where my graphic design and some of our other coworkers kind of graphic design tendencies bled into UX, in taking some of those design skills, applying them in this setting too, to kind of have some fun illustrations and things like that. But that was a super fun project to work on, and so yeah, check out our website definitely at credera.com to give a look to that. But also wanted to touch on a little bit of like the tools that a designer uses at Credera, or really at any level, whether you're working for a product company or in a consulting aspect like I do. But the main tools for designing are kind of one of the three here that I'm showing you. I'm not sure if any of y'all are familiar with these tools, but When I was in school, I actually just used Photoshop to design things, which is not kind of the standard of, digital interface design. But a lot of my peers used Adobe XD because if you have Creative Cloud, that's free to you to use or available with Creative Cloud. However, whenever I started working at Credera, we were using Sketch and then had switched over to Figma. So I think I recommend Figma for y'all. Figma is a really good collaborative one. It has like a good free option if you want to just go explore. Sketch also has a lot of robust features, but I don't know if they have a free version. I'm not sure, but Figma would be a great starting point. Adobe XD is great as well if you have access to it already. It's a little less intuitive in my opinion, but it still will provide all the capabilities to both design and prototype, so that you can test basically designs to kind of just start playing around with designing in those platforms. But consulting at Credera, wanted to kind of touch on a little bit about how it is specifically at Credera. So one thing that I learned starting here was what consulting was. I actually didn't really even know what consulting was when I started, but basically consulting is going to allow you to do more than just design experiences. So I was able to take my skills in visual communication design as a designer, and apply them to my job, but I also was kind of learning things on the fly too here. One thing that's really good about consulting is that you get to work on a lot of different clients. So like I had mentioned, we worked on Chili's, we worked on Finish Line, we have a bunch of other different clients. So if you're interested in variety, consulting is kind of the way to go. With, let's say you were wanted to be a product designer, which is basically a UX designer. People get hung up on the names, but product design, UX design, kind of the same realm. If you were to be a product designer at, some big companies, obviously that have, really good product design, I guess, practices are like, Google, Apple, Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, things like that. Your goal is basically to follow a design system, something that's already been kind of laid out for you, and just build out features. They'll say, here's a feature we need, here's our existing, look and feel, in some design, in some components, and try to make something new with what we have. Consulting is really great because sometimes you're starting from the ground up. Sometimes a client doesn't really have a strong website or an app, and you kind of get to be the one to make those initial decisions and build out a design system. And there's a lot of fun control there. So you'll get to learn about different industries, kind of solve, unique challenges, and just learn best practices as far as like research and designing and passing off to development, but also collaboration as well. So in consulting, you'll be actually doing a lot of the talking with the clients yourself. So like in advertising, there's usually like kind of like a middleman. You have your account manager. Well, they'll kind of do a lot of the talking to the clients for you and just give you basically the info you need to design things. Consulting is super hands-on, so you'll be designing the stuff yourself. You'll be talking to the clients, trying to work and figure out design requirements and business requirements and things like that. So there's a lot of growth there that you can have. That was something for me that I wasn't initially good at, but I've gotten a little bit better at, just kind of interacting with clients, presenting, things like that. But yeah, basically exploring multiple different industries and just being able to grow because of that. But with all that being said, that's kind of, UX and how that relates to, consulting. We had recently just filled up some internship roles. So we are not looking for internships right at this moment, but we will be looking for interns probably, end of spring, kind of looking toward the summer. But if y'all want to keep up with us at Credera, just follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and definitely check out our website, since we're super proud of that, since we just kind of recently vamped that up. But thanks for letting me be here and kind of give you a little bit of insight. I'm not sure if Troy has hopped on, but I'm going to be able to kind of just answer, questions at this point, or, anything like that. Let me see. Awesome.
Thanks, Nathan. Troy is not with us. I don't know. Maybe he has some sort of emergency or something. But I did actually have a question. I know you were just mentioning internships. What kind of parameters do students need to be aware of when applying for these internships? Like, what kind of portfolio, I guess,
Yeah.
expectations are necessary for
Yeah, so
applying?
it'll definitely kind of depend on your level. I'm not sure what everyone's level here as far as freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, those types of things. Ideally, we would want at least a good preliminary foundation of understanding not only design, but designing for a digital experience, and not only, oh, sorry, I thought I lost you for a second.
No, it's here.
um, but yeah, so basically what we'd be looking for is either maybe you potentially have a website, or you could compile some work in a PDF. But ideally, we would want to see some initial thinking around user experience and design. So one thing that Troy could probably talk to better than I can, but whenever I was going through the program, my focus was visual design, and so it was all about making things look good, presenting them in a nice way. With UX, the new UX path, there is going to be a little bit more focus on not only that, but the thought process. So if you're making design decisions on, for a digital interface, whatever that is, whether it's an application, it's a website, an app, whatever, basically leaning on whatever user research you can do. So there's some like really good, user research websites like Nielsen and Norman Group or the Baymard Institute, where you can kind of do some initial research yourself if you want to. But really, it's mainly just showing designs, showing things that you've kind of started to make, and then showing that you have thoughts around why you did what you did. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a website. It could be a PDF. I think for juniors and seniors, it would be good to have a website if you can, just because since that's the kind of field we're playing in anyway. You know, being able to kind of present yourself on a portfolio site would be great.
Right. Yes. That was an excellent answer. And I actually urge students all the time to make a website because that it can act as a portfolio in itself. So yes, that's just kind of echoing what I've been telling students all along. So awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? I don't have any questions in the chat yet. Let's see. No, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So maybe Nathan can speak to, 5 advice he didn't get in college that he wished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I could definitely touch on that a little bit. So like I had mentioned, my experience with the visual communication design program was more on the graphic design side, which I kind of found myself in a little more of a different role than traditional graphic design now, being in the user experience space. But one thing that I'll say that is super helpful that maybe you don't necessarily always get in school is just learning to talk about your work. So we definitely do it in school, but it's something that comes with practice as well. Once you're kind of in the industry, whether that is at an agency doing something more traditional with like advertising or graphic design or branding, but just being able to have a thought process around your decisions and just be super thoughtful. Not necessarily making things pretty to be pretty, but having a good thought process around it. But then also just, one thing I found myself doing in school that was super helpful for me was just trying to be inspired by other people's work. So basically, and it's something I didn't do until a little bit later, but just finding yourself looking at other people's work, whether it's on Dribble or Instagram or whatever. If you're looking at good design on a daily basis, that will most likely bleed over into your own work. Not using them, to basically take what they're doing and make and copy it, but basically to influence your own work. I know in school, whenever I was taking kind of the preliminary classes, a lot of teachers would talk about stealing like an artist, and that's definitely something that holds true, I think, in all kind of artistic, even something more functional like UX design, but looking and saying, what are people doing, why is it working the way it's working, and how can I apply that in a new way to whatever I'm working on. So definitely keep up with being just inspired, looking at good design, things like that. That's going to be super valuable for you. So that would be my piece of advice.
Do you have any favorite designers that you follow on, let's say, Instagram that you think students should look into?
Let's see. I follow literally so many people. I actually mostly use Instagram as a place of inspiration. So I'm following, like, I don't know, thousands of people, and I have like maybe like 200 followers of like friends and family and whatever. But I don't know if I can think of too many people off the top of my head. Aaron Draplin is a really cool graphic designer. Um, I a lot of the inspiration I look at is in graphic design and print design and things like that, just because a challenge with digital design is you are limited to some aspect, right? It's you can't just paint on a piece of paper. You have to follow some kind of system. There is a balance between what you can make and what a developer can also make. But that being said, I like to break out of that mold as much as I can, because, that's how you make interesting, more compelling digital experiences. It's by looking to see, what other people are doing, even if maybe it's not possible for this project from a development perspective or a tech perspective or whatever. But using that as an inspiration to say, how can I challenge what is possible here? How can I break out of doing something that is not super generic? That's something that we kind of have to struggle with a little bit in digital spaces, is like, how can I make this less generic? And whether that is how we compose layout of the website or an app, or with like even just like encouraging clients to explore their photography and their illustration and their iconography. So that's super important as well. But let's see, if I'm trying to remember if I can think of any off the top of my head. One thing I would take a look at is Dribble. Dribble is a pretty good site. There are some caveats with Dribble, because Dribble does tend to lean more flashy, but the goal of Dribble really for me is to kind of in the same realm of like, let's push what is possible and what other people are doing. But one thing you always have to keep in the back of your mind is like, and you'll learn this as you get into the industry, is, can this be done from a front end perspective? And not only that, but there are important accessibility things to think about too, when you're designing things. And what I mean by that is making sure, if users are the center of what we're doing, we need to make sure that it's not good for people with great eyesight, but also people with maybe poor eyesight. So making sure contrast is good on all of your sites, making sure things are legible, things like that. That's also super important to do. But so sometimes Dribble doesn't necessarily all cater to people with disabilities, visual disabilities, things like that. But it's super important to think about. If y'all are interested in that, I would take a look into accessibility too, just to make sure that we're blending art, but also leaning into functionality as well as best we can.
Awesome, thank you. And it looks like we have a question in the chat. Nathan, I don't know if you can you read what's in the chat, or should I read it out loud?
Let me see. Okay, let me read. Like, so yeah, so I was able to read the question. So does non-client research such as testing novel UI, UX techniques, biometric, so no, yeah, no worries, Jonathan. But so in our experience, so it, ideally, in consulting, we are definitely going to do that work ourselves as far as like testing. So there are kind of two ways, and I forget the technical terms, but there's two ways to gather research. You can kind of do it. One way is where you're going to websites like BAME Art Institute and Nielsen Norman, and you're looking at research that has been done already, and you're using that to influence your designs. So that is one kind of like one way to research. But there's another way of like conducting that testing yourself, and actually making something and then going straight to users and testing it. When you say biometrics, like I'm not 100% sure what you mean by biometrics, but we do, like with user testing, we'll do like eye tracking type things where if the client is willing to kind of do that, when we show clients or users work, we'll have this like eye tracking software, where basically we can kind of see where users are looking at on the page and being able to test things like that. But in consulting, we get hired because software companies aren't necessarily doing that work themselves. It depends, like Google, Facebook, bigger companies, they will definitely do all that work themselves. They have product teams with the goal of doing research and designing and doing all that in-house. Companies that are smaller, that maybe their product team is small or they don't have a product team, they will hire us basically to help them do that. And then that's kind of where we will basically work with them to figure out what research needs to be done. We also have to kind of have constraints with budget and stuff too. If they have a smaller budget, we may have to limit what we can do. But ideally, we always kind of try to push them toward the UX strategy and research side of things, and then designing and then kind of ultimately developing it for them as well, and just having hands-on on all those aspects. But it definitely depends client to client. But ideally, if we can convince them, or if they're all for it, then that's something we like to do.
Great question. Awesome. So I wanted to share my screen because I looked up Dribble, and this is the Dribble website. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I looked it up. It looks really awesome and very engaging. And so this is a place where designers can post their ideas. Is that pretty much like the gist of the website?
Yeah.
And I also noticed that there was an area where you could, like, if students wanted to work on like freelance projects, there's that. Designer search, job post and search. So that seems like really cool.
Yeah. I mean, Dribble is basically kind of like a social media for designers, and it is nice too because you can kind of search by category. So if you're looking for some branding stuff, some cool logos, some cool I don't know, websites, whatever, literally whatever, you can kind of filter by that. So you can look up product designs, branding designs, publication designs. It does tend to lean more branding and digital here, less than kind of print stuff, which is good if you're interested in kind of more of a digital space. Also, one thing that I'm interested in that I'm kind of exploring on my own is motion design, and basically how do we animate a logo or animate an icon, and how I would use that in the field would be, I have an idea for an animation and I'll kind of come up with something and then work with the developer to see, how we can animate something. So I haven't been able to do that quite yet, but it's an interest of mine that I'm also trying to pursue. So Dribble has some cool animation, motion design stuff on here, which is super cool. So yeah, it's great just to spark your interest, even if, not everything is 100% doable, just because, you have clients to work for and you have business needs and accessibility things, but it's great to spark that inspiration for sure.
Awesome. And it looks like we had another question from Jonathan in the chat.
Okay, let's see. Am I working on personal projects? So one thing that I've learned that is a little bit challenging once you are, working, in an industry, it can be a little draining if you want to do, work on your stuff during the day, but then also do personal stuff after work. Because sometimes I just want to veg out and play video games and things like that. But every now and again, I will, coming from that kind of traditional graphic design background, I like doing lettering and things like that. So I like to just kind of explore lettering. I also kind of sometimes will explore just my own initial ideas for, product design things, but I haven't really finished out anything. It's more of just exploration on my part. But by all means, keeping up with things on the side is super, is super great, especially if it kind of fosters creativity for you. But yeah. Oh, understandable. I'd love to apply design to video games. So actually, one game is slightly off topic, but one game that I really enjoyed was The Last of Us, and I was watching a video about how they made that game, and I was interested that they had like UX people in video games. So I don't know a ton about it, but basically designing the menus that your players are interacting with to make sure that they can switch their gun quickly or do whatever. That's also super interesting to me. I don't know too much about the industry, but if you're interested, checking out UX and how that relates to video games, that's also super interesting.
I've had a lot of students actually ask me about game design and animation, which we don't really offer at UNT. But it's interesting that you say that there is kind of like an intersection between the two. So that could be something to do a little bit more research on my end, but that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a little bit more about less about the games and gameplay type stuff and more of like the in between,
Right.
the menus and what you're seeing on the screen to help like your mini maps and your things like that, making sure that those things are legible on screen while you're trying to play a game and useful, in designing kind of different features to help you do things quickly. That's a whole other realm of trying to do UX in the video game space, but it's interesting for sure.
Awesome. All right. Do we have any other questions? It looks like we do. Diana just posted one.
So let's see, Diana. So let's see, is it common? I would say, I haven't done freelance personally myself. And the reason for that is, I've only been in, the industry for a couple of years, but my reasoning behind not doing freelance as of right now is because my main goal is to learn and learn from other people. And, I kind of figured it would be harder for me to do that alone and trying to, figure out things for myself. And there's a whole other thing to freelance of like, not only are you supposed to be working on your craft and making good things, but you also need to handle the business side of things a little bit too, which can just be a lot. So I think freelance is a great goal for once you've been in the industry for a while. Not to say that you can't do it. It's probably more of a personal preference type thing. I kind of wanted to just, work for a company, enjoy some stability as I'm learning. And then if I want to go and kind of do that on my own, it's something that you could definitely do. I know that there are plenty of people that do freelance UI, UX design. They usually will offer even kind of like branding along with things as well. So where they're not only kind of giving a brand a new look and feel, but applying that to design as well. But there are things you need to figure out if you're a designer specifically, as far as like, how do I make this? Like, now that I've designed this, am I going to use a platform like Squarespace or Shopify or something like that to actually build it and make it a website? Or am I going to learn code to actually make this, develop this thing? Or am I going to hire someone, along on the project with me to help me make it? So there are a lot of questions to figure out, and unless you are just kind of selling concepts, but those will be kind of shorter, less intensive projects if you're just doing the initial concepting. But so my personal preference is to work in the industry for a while before I get into freelance. But it ultimately is up to you. If you like having a hands-on on all of those aspects, definitely give freelance a try. But it's definitely a path. And I even know some people that will actually do both. So to your point about having a side gig, some people will have a side gig basically where they have a job in UX or UI, or maybe they're on the side designing logos for people, or they're helping their friends with websites or things like that. That could certainly be also a way that you manage that. You basically kind of figure out some hourly rates and apply those, but also be sure to manage your work life and your side life, and make sure you're giving yourself time to like relax and things like that too. It can be hard to balance those things, so definitely encourage some balance, but you definitely could do both things. Yeah, one thing that I'm kind of interested in learning some web development. It is just kind of a whole other beast of things to tackle. There's the idea of making something look really good, and then just making it is just a whole other thing. So I've tried to learn a little bit about it. But yeah, it's a little different. I think my passions more lie around the visual aspect and the usability aspect. But dev, if you're interested in dev as well, you'll be super powerful because you can offer those two skills. Especially as a freelancer, you can design and develop that for yourself. So yeah, I would say, if you're interested, yeah, if like you just said, basically, if you're interested in dev, look into it. If you want to learn some primer or some initial CSS or HTML to kind of learn, in JavaScript to learn how to do more dev related things, but it's not essential. If design is your passion and your focus, you don't necessarily have to go be a developer. But one thing that is really good, beyond development as a skill, is like just design thinking in general. So learning how to just solve problems before you even get to designing things. So it's more of like a design thinking. If you're interested in design thinking, there's a good book called Sprint, where I think I can't remember who it was developed by, but if you type in Sprint design thinking, a book will come up. And take a look into that book. It's really about solving problems, and you can apply this sprint methodology to a bunch of different industries. It could be engineering, it could be, you know, user experience, it could be literally anything. But it's a way for you to rapidly figure out problems and how to solve for them before you actually start even a project. So if you're interested in learning about kind of high level problem solving, that is a good idea, just because you can be really valuable in the strategy and insights portion. You know, being able to translate things like that into design, into visual design, is also an important skill. You know, because if you're focused so much on making things look good, but you don't know how to solve the business requirements, i.e., maybe we need to increase sales in this area, or we need to like make sure people are understanding this information. So it's like translating those business requirements into visual aspects. That's another skill as well. So if you're interested in that, check out Sprint, because that's just a kind of a cool methodology for problem solving that, you know, kind of comes before design, and it would certainly help if you take a look at that.
Awesome. All right. Do we have any final questions? All right. Well, we had some really awesome questions in the chat. And we had like a really great conversation. We're finishing a little early today, but that's totally fine. It's Friday. It looks like, okay, Diane said thank you. You know, we're finishing early and it's Friday and it's fine. So, Nathan, I really appreciate you being in the session today, answering questions, presenting to students. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for, you know, listening to me talk, and, you know, hopefully I was able to answer some questions about UX, and I definitely encourage y'all just to kind of, you know, keep looking into it, keep exploring, and that way you can kind of just figure out, you know, where you basically want to go. So awesome.
All right. Well, I'm going to end the session. You guys, I'm going to post the recording to the Career Center's webpage. So if you want to refer back to the recording, you can always do that. Email me if you have any questions. But thank you all for being here today, and I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcy.
You're welcome. Y'all have a great weekend.
Yep, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, you too.